and welcome to another Tri-tutors video. In today's language-focused video, we're going to be looking at Concord errors, otherwise known as subject-verb agreement errors. So what is subject-verb agreement before we get to any sort of errors involved? So subject-verb agreement is when the subject in the sentence agrees with the corresponding verb in the sentence. So a sort of simple way to remember it is if the subject is singular, the verb must be singular. If the subject is plural, the verb must be plural. So what they tend to do is in a language paper, whether you're doing DBE, CAPS, or IB, in that last question where you have language or textual editing, they will either ask you to correct the grammatical error, so they won't actually tell you that it's a Concord or subject-verb agreement. They might actually ask you to name the error, so what type of grammatical error is it, but they also most often ask you to identify and correct the error. So my tip is that the way to go about doing this is always to go into your extract, into your text, circle your subject, circle your verb, and then it's going to be clear to see which ones are in alignment and which ones aren't. So circle your subject and label on the top with an S or a P. Is it singular or plural? Do the same with the verb in the sentence, and if you have both of them are singular, then you know you don't have an error. If you have one is singular, one is plural, then you know you have an error and you need to switch around one of them. Usually, 99% of the time, you're going to be switching the verb. So you're going to keep the subject as it is and then change the verb to either be singular to match the subject or plural. That's the most often you will change and alter that verb. So let's go through some examples and you'll see how it's put into practice, because unfortunately, with subject-verb agreement, it's not often something that students are able to see really quickly, because the way we speak English, just in general, as a language, is we make a lot of these errors, but we don't really correct them, and it's sort of just understood what we're meaning to say. So we have a lot of errors just in the way that we speak in our dialogue every day. So sometimes it's a little bit more tricky to actually identify it as being inaccurate. So here are a couple of examples. Now these are all correct, but you'll see that some of them don't look right. They look a little bit strange. And that's because, like I was saying, we sort of sometimes gloss over the errors when we're reading or when we're speaking. So if we have a look at the first one, they walk everywhere. Now this is pretty simple. This one, we can all agree that sounds right. And the reason is that they is our subject and it is plural. Now walk is our verb and it's also plural. So it's a bit of a weird thing, but if you think about it, if you think he walks, because he is singular, walks is the singular form of the verb. It ends in an S, which sometimes confuses people, but it's not that confusing if you remember the S is for singular. So they walk, walk is actually plural, they is plural, therefore it's correct. What's nice and easy about this one is it's a very simple sentence, obviously, but also the subject and the verb are really close together. Now that's not always the case. They're going to try and catch you out in the exam. So they're going to put the subject maybe a little further away from the verb that it corresponds to. So that's why I say circle each one so you stay focused and on track. Right, the next one uses a collective noun, and this is when things can fall apart if you're not aware of it. So the pride of lions hunts. Now, the pride is actually our subject, and that is singular. So even though there are many lions, we're using a collective noun, we're putting it together, and therefore it's actually going to be a singular subject, which means that our verb needs to also be singular. So it needs to end in an S, it needs to be hunts. The next one is the audience at the cinema. So even though the audience is comprised of many people, audience itself is singular, and therefore the verb needs to be singular as well. So claps, as you can see over there, we've got that distance between the subject and the verb. So it's important that you go ahead, circle each one, and then it's going to be clear if there is an error that you need to correct or if it is permissible. The next one we have is the message between the lines. So the subject is actually message, which is singular. So it needs to be is instead of are. The results of the experiments conducted by the team of researchers from different countries who had spent months collecting data have surprised the scientific community. Now this one is a really long one, and as you can see, results is actual subject and have is our verb, and they're very, very far apart. We've got loads of extra information, so they're trying to distract you in the exam with all that other bit of information, but it's important to remember that The subject of the sentence is results, and that's plural. Therefore, the verb needs to be plural as well. It needs to be have. The case of champagne bottles is for the year-end party. Once again, using a collective, so using case. There are many champagne bottles. The subject is the one singular case, though. Unless it said cases, then it obviously would be plural. But here it's the case, it's singular. Therefore, the verb must be singular as well. The team. The team, it's one unit. Even though there are many people in a team, it is one singular unit. Therefore, the subject is singular. Is the verb needs to be singular as well. And the last one is one that I think people, when we speak, even when I speak, I make this error all the time, is each. So each of the students, we're talking singular over here. Therefore, it should be is responsible. Each of the students is responsible for his or her homework. Now that's another thing, and that's maybe another video about a pronoun error, because we often make a mistake over there saying each of the students is responsible for their homework, and it actually should be his or her, because we're talking about the individual and not about a group. But that's a separate video. That is not actually a Concord error, because it's not to do with the verb, it's got to do with the pronoun. But in terms of going back to our subject-verb agreement, each is matched with is because they are both singular. Thank you so much for watching. I hope that you found this video helpful, and I'll see you in the next one.